My sons put a closed sign on my diner while I was still cooking. Part 1. My older son shut off the register while I still had 12 eggs on the grill. At the same moment, dining room full of customers and pressed a bright, white sign against the front window, closed. I stared at it, through the steam rising from my griddle. "Marcus," I said, "take that down." He turned with the careful, sympathetic expression people use when they have already decided you are too emotional to understand what they are doing. "Mom, please don't make this harder." I was 63 years old, and Hale's diner had been mine for 30 years. I had opened it with 6 secondhand booths, 1 temperamental stove, and enough borrowed money to keep me awake every night for a decade. My sons had grown up eating at the counter. Now Caleb stood beside the register in a pressed blue shirt, while Marcus moved to the center of the dining room and raised his hands. "Everyone, may I have your attention?" I turned back to the grill. The eggs were browning at the edges, and customers were still waiting for breakfast. "Don't," I warned him. Marcus smiled at the room. "After a lot of family discussion, our mother has decided it's time to retire." The diner went silent. I slid the last eggs onto a plate. "I have decided no such thing." His smile tightened. "We know this is emotional for her. There have been a few mistakes recently, and we all agree. Mom deserves to rest before those mistakes become something more serious." A few customers looked at me with concern. 3 weeks earlier, I had entered one turkey club incorrectly during a rush. A few days later, I forgot to sign an inventory sheet because I had spent 6 hours covering for a sick cook. Those were the mistakes my sons were using to erase me. Marcus lifted his phone. "We've already posted a statement explaining the transition. You posted it before telling me." He glanced at Caleb. That was when I realized this had not started that morning. They had simply waited until I was surrounded by witnesses to make it official. After the customers were sent home, my sons took me into the back office. A glossy folder sat on the desk. Across the cover were 2 words: "Hale's Quick." They planned to tear out half the booths, replace my longtime servers with touchscreens, cut the menu to 12 items, and use frozen food from a regional distributor. Caleb called it scalable. Marcus called it the Hale's experience, only faster. I called it a diner without the people who had kept it alive. 5 years earlier, after a health scare, had let my sons reorganize the business. They controlled the lease, the bank accounts, and the company name. I had trusted them because they were my children. Now Caleb pushed a retirement statement toward me. It said I had voluntarily stepped away because age-related difficulties were affecting my work. "We'll give you a monthly stipend," he said. "You can still appear at special events." Marcus leaned closer. "People will want to know you support us." I pushed the paper back. "You don't want my support. You want my face?" I walked into the kitchen, opened the drawer beneath the register, and removed 2 things they did not own: my flour-stained apron and a worn black notebook filled with the names of people I had quietly tied when they could not pay. Caleb barely looked at it. "Fine," he said. He had no idea what that notebook represented. Outside, I had taken only 3 steps into the alley when Ruth Delgado, one of my former waitresses, called my name. Years earlier, after her husband died, I had fed Ruth and her 2 children for 6 months without ever giving them a bill. Now she pressed a brass key into my palm. "The VFW kitchen is empty every morning," she said. "It's licensed, inspected, and available from 5 o'clock. I'm not taking charity." "Good. I'm charging you rent." Then she closed my fingers around the key. "You fed my family when I had nothing. June, I'm not asking you to collect a debt." She looked back at the diner where my sons were removing my handwritten menu. "I'm asking whether you still want to cook." Part 2. By midnight, 47 people had prepaid for breakfast in the VFW hall. Some names came from the old notebook. Others were simply customers who had heard I was cooking again. But before I served the first plate, Marcus posted another message. "Mom is having difficulty adjusting to retirement. We appreciate the community giving her space during this confusing time. He used a photograph of himself kissing my cheek beneath the Hale's Diner sign. The lie was no longer just about taking my job. My sons were trying to convince the town that anything I did next was proof I was unstable. Then my meat supplier called. For 20 years, Hale's favorable terms because I paid reliably and worked with what his small company could provide. Caleb had demanded chain store prices, 60-day credit, and guarantees Darnell could not safely make. So Darnell canceled their contract. He did not offer to rescue me. He offered standard wholesale prices with payment every Friday. That's fair, I told him. I thought so, he said. By the time my sons were ready to reopen Hale's Diner with frozen food and digital menus, I already had 47 breakfast orders, a licensed kitchen, and former employees asking when they could start. But the first rush at the VFW nearly ended everything. My hands swelled around a skillet. Orders backed up. And when the pan slipped from my grip, Marisol caught it before it hit the floor. Then she looked me straight in the eye. You left one diner because your sons treated your labor like it had no limit, she said. Are you going to build another one that does the same thing? Part 3. Marisol's words hurt because they were true. The old diner had survived partly because I had treated my body, my savings, and my time as if they cost nothing. My sons had watched me do it for years, then built their business plan around the belief that I would always keep doing it. I looked at my swollen hand and turned off the last burner. We're done for today, I said. That evening, 6 customers canceled after Marcus posted that my little breakfast operation was unofficial and proof I was struggling with retirement. For the first time, I wondered whether Caleb had been right about one thing. Maybe I could not run a diner the way I always had, but that did not mean I could not run one differently. The next morning, Marisol, Ruth, for former employees, and I sat around a folding table inside the VFW meeting room. We cut the menu to 3 breakfast plates and 1 rotating special, created timed pickup windows, and put Marisol in charge of scheduling in the dining room. Everyone would receive an hourly wage. No one would work just until things got better. Then I opened my rainy day notebook. I still want to help people, I said, but I can't keep pretending food and labor cost nothing. We created a separate pay-forward fund. Customers could contribute if they wanted, and employees could use it without asking me to approve every meal. At the top of the new menu, I had written Hale's Breakfast. I stared at the name for a long moment, drew one line through it, June's Table. A week later, Darnell Price, the man who had supplied our meat and dairy for almost 20 years, called me. I wanted you to hear this from me, he said. I ended Hale's contract. My stomach tightened because of me. No, because Caleb demanded chain store prices, 60-day credit, and volume guarantees he couldn't prove. I run a family business. June, I can't finance his expansion. Are you offering me their old terms? I asked. No, he said. I almost laughed. Then what are you offering? His answer came without hesitation. Standard wholesale price. Payment every Friday. That's fair. I thought so. It was not a rescue. It was a real chance, and that meant I would have to earn everything that came next. By the end of the month, our orders had become steady enough to cover wages, rent, and food. Then an email arrived from the county food festival. June's Table had been accepted, and 2 rows away, in the commercial vendor section, was Hale's Quick. Part 4. 3 nights after the festival, assignments were announced. Caleb and Marcus came to my house. Caleb carried a folder. Marcus carried an old photograph of the 3 of us standing beneath the original Hale's Diner sign. In the picture, Caleb was 19, Marcus was 15, and both boys wore aprons. Their father had been behind the camera. We're reopening next Saturday, Caleb said. We'd like you there, I answered with one word. No. Marcus placed the photograph on my kitchen table as if it were evidence. People are confused, Mom. They think there's a family feud. I looked at him. There is. We can fix that. He slid his phone toward me. On the screen was a draft announcement, saying my health had improved enough for me to bless the next generation of Hale's Diner. I looked up at him. You already retired me once. Now live recovered. It gives everyone a graceful explanation. When I asked what needed explaining, he said, "Why you're cooking again?" "I'm cooking because I never chose to stop." Caleb closed the folder. "We're losing staff because they think you expect loyalty." "I haven't asked anyone to leave you," when he replied. "You didn't have to," I said. "That should tell you something." Marcus's expression hardened. "You're enjoying this. You want your own sons to fail." The accusation landed exactly where he knew it would. For most of my life, I had measured motherhood by how quickly I could fix whatever hurt my children. But I finally understood what they were asking me to fix. Not a mistake, a consequence. "I don't want you to fail," I said, "but I'm done being the thing that keeps you from finding out whether your plans work." Caleb stood. "Don't expect us to save a place for you later." I looked at the photograph, then at the two men who had used it to make betrayal look like family love. "You already removed my place." Marcus snatched up his phone. Caleb took the folder. Neither of them touched the photograph. After they left, I sat alone at the table for several minutes. Then I turned the picture face down and went back to preparing for the festival. For the first time since they closed the diner, I was no longer trying to prove I deserved my old place. I was preparing to see whether the town would choose the new one. Part 5. The County Food Festival opened beneath a bright September sky. Hale's Quick had digital menu screens, branded cups, and a polished booth large enough for a regional chain. June's table had a handwritten menu, borrowed folding tables, and a speaker that worked only when Marisol held the cord at an angle. By 10 o'clock, our line reached the pie stand. People came for different reasons. A woman whose mother I had once delivered soup to brought her grandchildren for pancakes. A former dishwasher ordered breakfast for his construction crew. Leon Carter arrived with 6 school bus drivers, but not everyone had a story about me. Some people simply preferred fresh biscuits, and that mattered even more. Across the aisle, Marcus smiled for photographs while Caleb watched sales on a tablet. Their booth looked perfect from a distance, but fewer people stopped. Near noon, a festival organizer approached me with Marcus beside her. "There seems to be some confusion about the two businesses," she said. "Marcus says you retired from Hale's and then opened a competing operation during your transition." Marcus gave me the same warning look he had used inside the diner. For months, I had avoided speaking because I did not want to embarrass my sons. But silence had not protected them. It had protected their lie. "I did not retire," I said. The organizer turned toward Marcus, but I continued. "My sons closed the diner while I was still cooking breakfast. They announced my retirement before they told me. I do not own the Hale's name, and LA am not asking for it back. But I will not let them use my silence as proof that I agreed." Marcus lowered his voice. "Mom, not here. Here is where you told everyone." Marisol stepped beside me. The mistakes they mentioned were one wrong order and an unsigned inventory sheet. June was covering for sick employees both times. Marcus's face tightened. "This is a private family matter. It became public when you posted it," Marisol replied. The organizer thanked us and walked away. Marcus remained in front of my booth, surrounded by the smell of biscuits and the sound of customers calling my name. For the first time since he had announced my retirement, my son had no prepared sentence. Part 6. An hour later, Caleb came to our booth. His red shirt was damp beneath the arms, and the confidence he had carried into my kitchen was gone. "We need 2 cases of eggs," he said. I told him we did not have extras. "You have enough for another 100 orders." "We have enough for our orders." When he said Darnell would not deliver until Monday, I reminded him that he had known the supplier's terms. Caleb glanced toward our line, then toward the nearly empty tables at Hale's Quick, then lend us to Cook's for an hour. Marisol looked at me. So did 3 employees who had once worked for my sons. This was the moment I had spent my entire life avoiding. Someone I loved needed help. I had the power to provide it. Helping him would cost me, but that had never stopped me before. My staff stays here, I said. Caleb stared at me as if he had not heard correctly. You're choosing strangers over family. No, I'm choosing the people who showed up for the work they agreed to do. He looked back at his booth, where Marcus was issuing refunds. You could fix this. I know. I turned toward the griddle. And I'm not going to. At the end of the festival, every vendor's customer tokens were counted. June's table placed first in the breakfast category. Hale's quick did not place. The investor group delayed its expansion talks. Caleb and Marcus kept the diner open, but they cut the hours and abandoned the immediate chain plan. People expected me to celebrate. I did not. They were still my sons. But I also did not step in, call their supplier, lend them money, rewrite their menu, or work one more unpaid shift. For once, I allowed the consequences to belong to the people who had created them. 3 months later, the VFW board asked me to attend a meeting. I expected them to discuss rent. Instead, Ruth placed a set of building plans in front of me. The annex beside the hall was being renovated, and they wanted June's table to become its permanent tenant. Part 7. The new space was smaller than Hale's diner. It had 9 tables, a modest counter, and a kitchen where 4 people could work without colliding. There was even a small office with a door that closed because Marisol had insisted on it. We signed a real lease. Senior employees received a path to profit sharing. The pay-it-forward fund remained separate from payroll and food costs, and Ruth managed community events twice a week. I agreed to cook for mornings instead of 7. That promise was harder to keep than any recipe. Caleb sent me a message asking whether we could meet for coffee. I said yes on one condition: no business folders. Marcus did not call. Not yet. On opening morning, I arrived before sunrise, carrying the old flour-stained apron I had taken from Hale's diner. For 30 years, I had tied it around my waist before turning on a grill. That morning, I hung it on a brass hook beside the kitchen door. Marisol noticed immediately. You're not cooking. Not for the first hour, I said. I'm trying something new. She smiled and pointed toward the counter. A young cook named Tessa stood at the grill. I had trained her for weeks, and she did not need me watching every movement. I sat on a stool. Around me, the dining room came alive. Coffee poured, tickets printed, and plates moved through the service window. No one panicked because I was sitting down. Tessa placed a plate in front of me, 2 eggs, toast, and a biscuit with blackberry jam. I didn't order this, I said. I know, she nodded. Toward Marisol. Boss's instructions. I looked at the open sign glowing in the front window. Then I looked at the kitchen running without consuming me. For the first time in 30 years, I sat inside a place I had built while someone else served me breakfast, and I let the plate stay in front of me long enough to eat it.